Hi everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to start talking about section 5.6, which involves the quadratic formula. For the quadratic formula to work, we're going to let a, b, and c be the real numbers. They're going to be the coefficients just like they were in chapter 1. So you've got ax squared plus bx plus c. So a is in front of x squared, b is in front of x, and c is just a number by itself. The key to this whole thing is right here, that this equation is equal to 0. If it is not equal to 0, you cannot use the quadratic formula. So usually you're going to need to move things around to get it equal to 0. If it's not, if it already is, great. You can just go ahead and plug into your formula, or you're going to have to do some adding or subtracting to move terms over to one side so that you get your equation equal to 0. Then I always like to identify my a, b, and c right away, but then your formula. This is going to spit out your solution. So you're going to get x is equal to negative b, and if b is negative, you're going to have double negative, so that'll be positive, plus or minus the square root of quantity b squared minus 4ac. Again, you get all those from your quadratic equation, all divided by 2 times a. A lot of people like this because you don't have to do the factoring or the square roots. It takes care of all that plus and minus for you already. So a lot of people tend to like that for that reason. It takes away a lot of the thinking, but it is a little more labor intensive than some of the other methods that we've used. So let's just jump right in, start taking a look at an example here. We have 2x squared plus x is equal to 5. Like I just said, you need this equal to 0 to work. So we're going to subtract 5 from both sides to get the equation 2x squared plus x minus 5 is equal to 0. Now that it is equal to 0, we can identify our a, b, and c. So a, the number in front of x squared, is going to be 2. B, the number in front of x, even though we don't see anything there, there's that imaginary 1. Hopefully you guys are comfortable with that by now. And c, the number by itself, is going to be a negative 5. Now that we've got a, b, and c, we can plug into our quadratic formula. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. From here, we plug into our formula. So b is 1, so that's going to become a negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 squared. I always put parentheses in here just in case b is negative. That way that negative gets squared as well. So this first term should always be positive. It's going to be minus 4 times a, which is 2, and c, which is negative 5, all over 2 times 2. And now it's just simplification. We're going to get negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 minus 4 times 2 is 8 times negative 5 is negative 40. All over. That should be a negative 1 plus or minus, and we're going to go 2 over 2, which is 4. Now, since we have subtracting a negative, then we're adding a positive, so we're going to get negative 1 plus or minus 1 plus 40, the square root of 41, all over 4. And this right here is a perfectly acceptable answer for me. If you want, you can split it up into 2. So if that square root of 41 came out to be a nice perfect square root, you would do you would break it off into two separate equations where you'd get -1 plus the square root of 41 over 4 and -1 minus the square root of 41 over 4. So you end up with two solutions there, but we just condense it with that plus or minus in there. So whatever method you like better, whether it's the final answer in the blue or the final answer in the green, I'm okay with. Whatever you want to do there is fine. The next one, again, we don't have our equation equal to 0. So we need to get this equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract my 5x over. I'm left with x squared minus 6x equals -9. And I add my 9 over. And I get x squared minus 6x plus 9 is equal to 0. From here, again, I identify my a, b, and c. A in front of x squared is going to be 1, b is going to be -6, and c is going to be 9. Again, we're going to use our quadratic formula. X is equal to -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, which is going to give us, I have -b, so I'm going to take -6, which is going to give me a +6 plus or minus the square root of -6 squared minus 4 times 1 times 9 all over 2 times 1. And now we're simplifying again. So we're going to get 6 plus or minus the square root of -6 squared. This is where those parentheses come in. That's 36 minus 4 times 1 times 9. Which is going to give me 36 all over 2, which is going to give me 6 plus or minus the square root of 0 over 2. Square root of 0 is just 0, so you're going to end up with just 6 over 2 or 3. So this one's just going to be one solution here, which means in terms of our graph that our vertex is just going to sit on the x-axis. It's going to sit there at 3. So your vertex would be at 3, 0. That can happen. The reason we get 6 over 2 is 6 plus 0 is 6. 6 minus 0 is 6. So we just use that as 6. We end up with our one solution. Last one. Again, got to get it equal to 0. Subtract 2. You get -x squared plus 2x minus 2 is equal to 0. Identify our a, b, and c again. So a this time is going to be -1 since I have that negative in front of our x squared. B is going to be 2, and c is going to be -2. Again, this is not something you need to do, but it really does help. Trust me on this one. When we plug into our formula, x is equal to -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And we plug in from there. So we're going to get -2 plus or minus the square root of 2 squared minus 4 times -1 times -2 all over 2 times -1. Which gives us -2 plus or minus the square root of 4 minus 4 times negative 1 times negative 2 should give me minus 8 here, and over a negative 2. 2 times negative 1 gives me that, which gives me negative 2 plus or minus the square root of negative 4 all over negative 2, which hopefully you guys can see where we're headed here. We can simplify the square root of negative 4. We get negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 times the square root of negative 1 all over negative 2, which is going to be negative 2 plus or minus square root of 4 is 2, square root of negative 1 is I all over 2. Now, there's a couple different ways that you can simplify this. Hopefully you guys can all recognize that something's got to happen because I've got 3 2's going on here. We got to reduce our fraction. In order to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to split this up into we're going to split this into 2 fractions. So it's going to look like negative 2, I lost my negative up here, over negative 2 plus or minus 2i over negative 2. And now this falls right into the regular fractions that you guys are used to. Negative 2 over 2 is just going to give me 1 plus or minus 2i over 2 is going to be negative I, and there is our answer. Otherwise, you can do that where straight from where we started here with these 3, they make a triangle. If you can make that triangle there, you can cancel all of those with that common factor. In this case, it's negative 2. It's called triangle cancellation. Otherwise, splitting it into the 2 separate fractions like we did in the black there will really help you out doing that too. All right, that's all I've got for you today. If you have questions, let me know, and I will see you guys in class.